What's up, guys? It's AU5. I just recently released a song called The Other Side with Chime on Monstercat. As of the other week, it has amassed over 100,000 plays on Spotify, which is awesome. So thank you guys so much for listening. Today, I'm going to be doing a project walkthrough of the song, and this video is going to be one of two parts. I'm going to be reviewing the conception, the intro, and the first drop of the song, and part two is going to be when Chime sent it back, how we kind of joined forces and collaborated and finished the song. That is featured in my sound design masterclass called The School of Bass. You can check that out in the description. And as always, I have a free sample pack for you. That is a bunch of the sounds, the basses, some drums, some melodic stuff featured in this song, and you can download that in the description as well. Also, if you want to learn even crazier sound design techniques than featured in this video, I highly recommend checking out my walkthrough of Cryptochrome. It is a full song walkthrough where I cover every single part of my song Cryptochrome, released on Chime's label Rushdown. I talk about my process, sound design, a bunch of theory as well. Check that out in the description. So with that being said, let's get into the tutorial. This is the initial session that I started for The Other Side. This is before Chime had any part in it. We talked about wanting to do a sequel to Voidwalkers. One of the first things that I had in mind was to experiment with reversing the end of Voidwalkers, just seeing where that goes inspirationally. So as you'll hear, the very first sound in The Other Side is actually the end of Voidwalkers. So this sound right here. So that's actually the end of Voidwalkers in reverse and pitched down 2 semitones. Like if I drag this out, you'll hear. And if I reverse this, so I just took this last bit, reversed it, and pitched it down. I wanted to make it a different key. Pitching it down to D sharp, I thought sounded cool. I just added some reverb automation to that. The next part that you hear is these chords. And that was actually inspired by the continuation of the reversed end of Voidwalkers. For these chords here, this is just a supersaw stack that I made with pretty much just Dune, which is really awesome because it has a bunch of different detune modes. And one of them is the swarm mode. Basically modulates each voice with noise. So this is how it sounds just soloed. And then there's a second layer, which is an octave lower, which is just using the non-linear detune mode. That's being processed through Sonoformer. And Sonoformer is just kind of like a spectral compressor. It just kind of flattens out the spectrum a little bit more. So I'm also using a little bit of hybrid reverb to get this like suction sounds, where the reverb automation increases after every chord stack. So I'm layering that with intro subs, which is just an operator. In the end, I changed up these sounds a little bit. This is basically just a preliminary session before we really got into the thick of it when Chime began to contribute his awesome sounds. And then this other sound is this phaser ARP here. That's really just operator, some erosion and warm verb. It's this square lead, and I'm using a little bit of a pitch envelope. That's without the pitch envelope, and this is with it. It's kind of just plucking it for like the first 7 milliseconds or so. Then I'm putting it through an erosion on sine mode. Kind of gives it that like sample reduced sound. And then I'm using warm verb, which is a really old plugin by Tone 2. It's just a multi-effects plugin, and it has like this super strings mode, which is kind of like fake chorus, some reverb, stereo phaser, and some ping pong. The kick drums hitting on every downbeat of the measure. Just a simple ride. Then I have this little harp here, which is a contact instrument from the Orchestral Essentials, Project Sam Orchestral Essentials. we got the main sound here that comes in, which is the square lead ripper. And that is a Dune sound as well. It's composed of this high square sound and then also this low square sound. And I'm using some overdrive. That's how it sounds. It's actually a saw wave mixed with a square wave that is being frequency modulated by oscillator 3, which sounds like this, which is actually like 2 semitones higher. But when you modulate a square wave with that triangle wave 2 semitones higher, it gives it a really nice texture. If I bypass that, it sounds like this. It gives it like a nice grit to it. It's just FM, really. We got these sounds here. This ice splash. This is actually a Foley recording that I recorded a couple years ago. It is a part of a large Foley session. There was a frozen lake outside of my house, and I decided to throw rocks in the frozen lake. It has like this watery sound, but also this like ice cracking sound. And then I just added some multiband with some expansion as a noise gate, grain delay, to kind of like spread it in the stereo field, an EQ, cut out some of the lows and boosting the mids. And then I'm using a vocoder with a really narrow bandwidth, self-modulating. So that goes from this completely atonal thing to it's kind of tonal and resonatory sounding, and then a little bit of hybrid reverb. Then I also have the drums here, just bow, bow. And that rhythm is kind of like a motif throughout the song, the bow, bow, ka, bow, bow, ka, that dotted eighth note kind of rhythm. Down here, we got a couple other things with this Neurocolor bass. It's this serum patch, like a hyper square wavetable that I made. And using some bandpass filtering, pitch map on the mid band of a 3-band crossover to kind of tonalize it. That's actually being triggered by this external instrument, which is playing a chord. As you can see, I'm using the chord MIDI effect going into a minor scale quantizer, and then I'm using the external instrument to map it to pitch map. And then it just takes that MIDI information as the input for pitch map. You can basically play chords and have those chords drive pitch map. You're not fixed to like any of these modes. Pretty much do whatever you want if you're sending MIDI to it. An EQ and then hybrid reverb. It's just kind of like giving it a little bit more ambience. I'm using these pitch mapped wavetables. This is actually just a bass jam that I did that has a bunch of like some wavetable that I made, really fast arpeggiation sine waves, and then just pitch mapping that, using that as a wavetable. And then just doing a bass jam on that. I'm adding some reverb, some low cut. A little bit of auto pan for that fluttery effect. Introducing these notes here just to kind of establish the turnaround progression. And then there's no rise really. I just went straight into composing the drop and seeing where that went. Drums are pretty typical. They end up getting replaced in the end. This top loop, this auto hi-hat, which is really just operator, some FM operator, and then I'm using an arpeggiator to kind of create this automatic hi-hat groove. This is just one MIDI note. I have these little plucks here with Serum. Just simple saw wave stuff. And then down here, we got color stabs, which are the kind of main sound of the drop. And these went through a lot of transformations, a lot of trial and error. As you can see, this is many different parallel layers. If I solo each one of these, there's this operator layer, which is kind of resonating this ninth harmonic and being distorted. And then there is this other operator layer, just kind of resonating a fifth. Add a little bit of chorus and dimension expander. There's this harmor layer. I guess I was messing with the harmonic level, this square pattern on the graph. Using Prism, make it sound a little bit more bell-like, and then some unison. Oh yeah, and then I'm also using the band phaser as the filter. Another layer I had is this razor layer, which is the sick pitch bend, comb notch, some centroid and reverb. Without all that, it sounds like this. And the comb notch really just metallifies it. And then the centroid makes it kind of like even more metallic and atonal. And then some reverb for stereo width and diffusion. And then got the sub layer with an operator. Last layer is just this paper bag sound, which is a noise in Serum, just for some texture. I got these pluck bass sounds here, made with Serum, bending some waves. And these are just kind of like intermediary sounds to kind of create more of a rhythm for the color stab. They're being played in between the color stab layers. And then I got these sounds down here. This Awaken Blast Laser, which is from my song Awaken. You can actually see how I made this in my Awaken walkthrough tutorial. Stab, Yager sound. Just a couple different things. We just got like a plucky sub, and then made with operator. This kind of springy sound. And this other plucky sound with operator. You can see how it's made with these configurations. And then I'm also just using these reverse pitch map table chords kind of as transitional sounds. And this little 808 fill, it's literally just a sine wave with operator and some pitch enveloping. This sound is just from a big bass jam. And then these sounds here, it's actually made with massive and some overdrive. And this bass jam with salty grain to make it sound a little bit more metallic. These are the settings that I have here. Increase the feedback, so get this really cool like squeaky metallic sound. And cut out the lows. This square lead ripper is basically just playing different notes throughout. So we have the main notes here, and then changing up there, doing it again, and then we have this little turnaround melody. And how I'm making that sound is really just automating the cutoff. And with the overdrive in the Dune patch, it kind of like gives it a little bit more of a grit. It's not just a typical low pass sound. Yes, and then I'm using Vital for this sound here. More of that pitch mapped wavetable, putting it through some filters and some effects. So it sounds like that. And then I'm adding just some lower mid sounds to give it a little bit more beef. And then a little bit of key tracked low high flange comb filter. And then just experimenting with different rhythms for the color stab. This little sound is from my Toxic cover. Oh yeah, and then I have this little sound here, which is just the square lead ripper. And then I'm using M Transformer to kind of create this bell effect, bending the global pitch. So basically what this thing does is it remaps frequencies. So if I have this off, it just sounds like a typical square wave. What I'm doing is I'm using it to kind of create this prism effect. If you're familiar with the prism in Harmor, it's able to bend harmonics atonally or inharmonically. You can really use it to create these like metallic or bell-like sounds from something that's just a simple analog waveform source. So it's a cool way to get like the effect of an additive or spectral synth without actually having to use one. And then I'm using this little Blossom Reese. As far as the arrangement goes, this is just a very rough arrangement. I just wanted to, get a sense of where this drop was going to go. I was experimenting with the original arrangement from Voidwalkers, where it has like the tonic drop with all the sound design, and then it has like the melodic chord drop. I decided to create kind of a drop made of chords, which use the same chords as the intro. So I got some of these sounds down here, this growl sound. This is mainly just Serum, low pass automation. It's a lot of effects here. So yeah, it's just two supersols. One is FM from B with the LFO1, and then I'm using this high pass filter to kind of give it that movement. Static chorus to give it some comb filtering. Phaser with high feedback. Then I'm using the flange low 6+ filter. And that kind of tonalizes it. I'm using the note modulator to key track the cutoff. Some EQ automation, multiband compression. And then that's going into mid-band vocoder, kind of creating some spectral contrast in the mids. And then that's going through a mid-side OTT to just boost it. And then the low pass And then I'm using this Lush pad, which is from my song Lush. It's a really good bass layer. So this is just massive, using the Grown 1, Rough Math 1, and then Modern Talking Table to kind of get this mid-range sound. And then it's going through a Pro Q, which is cutting out this range like very steeply, 274 hertz, a sine wave sub with operator. And that's just a really good layer for the sols. I'm using this Insta Neuro sampler sound. And this is just kind of a neuro bass that I made that I put into the sampler. And here's what it sounds like without any of the effects. It's just this wonky, like whippy sound with some pitch enveloping and some FM enveloping and some filter modulation, high pass filter modulation. Corpus, using it to kind of tune it, overdrive, and then glue compressor to thicken it up. I'm using the Stargate Redux bass. Pretty much just a saw wave. Actually, no, it's the iCan Has kick table. Basically, it's just like a thick sounding saw wave with some bandpass filtering. And then I'm using a phaser here, creating some notches in it. And then EQ and multiband to tame that. This drum fill, which is from my Was It You pack, combining some of these drum fills. Oh yeah, and this acoustic fill. These are made with Superior Drummer. I just made a bunch of fills one day and then been using them. I'll just cut them up. The second drop is basically the same as the first with some variations. I do this little fake out thing, which doesn't really get used in the original song. I'm changing the harmonic of the color stab, and I'm doing that by just changing the harmonic around on one of these operators, creating that little stutter effect by just using a beat repeat on the entire bass group. I rendered out all of these stems for him, sent them over, and then he started building on top of them. Also, a little bonus thing I have at the end here, a part that didn't get used. So it's going to be like a really chill ambient thing, like a really chill, like slow, spacey bridge. But we ended up just not using it because it didn't seem to fit. We had too many other things that were going on, but it sounded like this. Electric piano, Omnisphere pad. And this droney bass. We didn't use that. That is part one before Chime utilized the stems and built something on top of it. Real quick, I want to remind you to check out the sample pack for this song in the description. Also, while you're down there, there is a link where you can join the Cryptochrome walkthrough, where you can learn every tip, trick, secret, and strategy that I used to make my song Cryptochrome. If you dig this video and content like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you have any suggestions or ideas for future tutorials. With that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.